Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be speaking to Valérie Cabanes, who is the voice for ecocide law in France and the Francophone countries, and has been working to create legal protection for nature in France for many years. She has a background in activism and human rights law. And the last time I saw Valérie was in The Hague at the International Criminal Court last December, where we were present for the Vanuatuan ambassador's announcement that Vanuatu wanted the world to seriously consider a crime of ecocide. And we've had very exciting news from France over the last couple of weeks, where the French Citizens' Assembly voted for a crime of ecocide to be brought in France, and President Macron's response was very much in favour of taking it forward at the international level. So welcome, Valérie. Valérie, it's great to see you again. Can you tell us a bit about what's just happened in France?
Something quite amazing, in fact, because we were a spectator of a citizen democracy. In fact, a few months ago, there was the setup of a convention, citizen convention on climate, which has been proposed by the president, Emmanuel Macron, following the Gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets crisis last year, and also following the trial that we started against the state, because we found that the state was not following their objectives and obligation to tackle climate change. So we started to sue the states, and Emmanuel Macron decided to request citizens to propose changes and to propose measures in order to decrease by 40% carbon emissions before 2030. So 150 citizens were chosen by slot. That's what you say in English?
By lot, yeah.
By lot. So 150 citizens were chosen by lot. And during 9 months, they have been trained about all the scientific facts on climate change, erosion of biodiversity, everything about ecological crisis and climate change, and also listen to many experts in order to look at solutions, efficient solutions. And I might come back to that later on, but the result is that they proposed 149 measures, and two of them, they proposed that they could be adopted through referendum. So it means that the French population is asked to choose and I would say to choose about their future. That's what it means, because the citizens found that if they just let the legislators, the members of the parliament, decide about their measures, the most binding ones will be rejected. So they propose first to change the constitution in France and to make the French constitution an ecological constitution, which means that they requested that the Republic must guarantee that it will fight climate change, it will protect biodiversity and nature in general. And this they asked the French citizen to decide. And the second one, which is really amazing, is that they decided to propose through referendum. By 99.3%, they voted in favor of this measure, that the crime of ecocide should be recognized in criminal law in France. And that was really a shock. That was really a shock. I mean, I'm very happy because, of course, I met them and I discussed that with them in last January. But what I realized through this measure is that they really understood something so important.
Absolutely. I mean, this was a very exciting moment. I actually got in touch with you, Valérie, just on the weekend when they were doing that vote, because there was some noise emerging about Ecocide being part of those proposals, and I got in touch with Valérie and said, can you tell me more about this? And actually, her response was, if you go online, you see it live now. They're literally about to vote on it. And it was quite an extraordinary moment because, as I remember, there were various different rooms where the members of this randomly selected committee, effectively Citizens Assembly, were distributed, and each of the rooms was sending in their vote, and then at the end they added up the total, and there was one room where it was almost like a stadium. Everyone was kind of clapping their hands over their heads. It was quite an extraordinary thing, and I couldn't quite believe it. I saw this great kind of green block on the measurement, and I said, Valérie, is that what I think it is? Did they say 89%? And she said, no, 99% have voted in favor of this. And that must have been a really extraordinary moment for you, because you've been working to sort of promote the legal protection of nature for many, many years. Might you be able to tell us a little bit about how you got into all this?
Yeah. In fact, 10 years ago, I was fighting industrial projects like big dams in North Canada, in Brazil. And I wrote many reports, even to the UN Human Rights Commission, asking United Nations, why do you let someone, I don't know, like Dilma Rousseff, allowing such kind of project which will displace 20,000 people, destroy the Amazon forest, destroy the culture of the indigenous people there. And even within, I remember within Brazil, the Supreme Court requested to stop this Belo Monte Dam project because it was done against all international obligations of Brazil, considering the indigenous rights, considering the right to proper information and consent. And then I realized that something was missing in law, that all those big corporates and those big projects were, carried with full impunity and with the support of the states, of the banks, and I was really shocked. And then I remember I was giving a conference with Chief Raoni, this Kayapo chief from Brazil in France. And a lady, a British lady, came to me and said, that there is a lawyer in UK who is also trying to fight this kind of project and propose a law. And I discovered the work of Polly at that time, and it was in 2012, I remember. And at the same time, Polly was looking after some European citizen to launch a European citizen initiative to recognize the crime of ecocide through a European directive. And when I discovered the work of Polly, I said, but this is what is missing. Yeah. We need to lift this impunity of the corporates, and we need to recognize that when we destroy entire ecosystems, then we destroy the conditions of living of humans and non-humans. And I saw really because for me it was very obvious at that time already that we are interdependent with all beings and all ecological cycles. And if we don't protect this ecological balances and all species and all ecological cycles, then we cannot survive as a species in the world. So we launched this citizen initiative, and I was really alone in France when I started that. But I managed to get, I think in all the countries in Europe, I managed to get the biggest number of signatures in support of this law. But it didn't start really in other European countries. But then I decided that we need to go further, and I heard that, you know, what was proposed at the International Criminal Court needed to be defined very precisely, and Polly needed support also diplomatically to look after states to support the law. So in 2014 and 2015, I worked on a proposal, a definition of the ecocide, but more than the definition, it was really how to include that specifically in the Rome Statute. And then we started to send that to 60 state members. I gave it in 2015 in the end of Ban Ki-moon at COP21 in Paris. Sent it the proposal to the ICC prosecutor and the ICC president. So I'm working in this campaign since a very long time. And also I was a French voice. And that was important because I really noticed that it was missing in the Stop Ecocide campaign. There was no French voice. And you know, that half of Africa and many states in the world, I mean, people are still speaking French or Latin languages. So it was important to have this. So I'm working on this a very long time. But what happened through this path of promoting the law of ecocide at the international level, French politicians started to be interested because there was also this campaign in France made the citizen more and more aware of this. And so, you know, the politicians, when they see that the citizens are interested in the subject, they start to move.
I think this is really important in terms of what's happened in France, because in fact, the whole conversation around ecocide has been, you know, has kind of got much further in France than it has in other countries. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened last year? Because, you know, there has been a kind of gradual increase in the awareness of ecocide, and Macron, as he was keen to point out himself, was the first sort of a major head of state to actually call you know, the crime of ecocide, as we would call it, by that name when he described what was happening in the Amazon. And that obviously was against a backdrop of, you know, French awareness around it. And, you know, when I founded the Stop Ecocide public-facing campaign in 2017, it was, as Valérie says, very much based on English language, and it's in the last year, in fact, since the sad departure of Polly, that we've been gradually learning, you know, who else has really been working on this in other places as well, and how far this has got. So, would you like to give us a little, update on what the context was in France for that citizens' assembly to be so committed to a law of ecocide in their proposals?
Maybe before, I must explain how the word became known by the citizens, because in fact, since 2015, I lobby for the recognition of ecocide in France at the highest level. I've been to the Élysée in 2015 with a delegation of indigenous leaders and with Raoni, but there were a lot of them, just before the COP21 started. And we met the president at that time, that was Hollande. And I asked Hollande, and the delegation of indigenous leaders requested Hollande to put on the table of the COP21 negotiation the recognition of the crime of ecocide at the Élysée. And François Hollande answered, you know, I have this is a big deal, the COP21. I need to get an agreement, a treaty on climate. I cannot do everything at the same time. But he said it officially. Yeah? So I fully understand the need to recognize the crime of ecocide, but diplomatically, I cannot put both on the table at the same time. That was the first point. Then as I was explaining, some politicians started to campaign on the crime of ecocide at the national level, at the presidential elections, and then the European elections, and then at the Senate in France, a first proposal of law appeared last year and was presented at the Senate in May 2019 and rejected. And that's why Emmanuel Macron used the word ecocide when he spoke about the Amazon, because the government rejected the law, explaining that the crime of ecocide should be recognized internationally, but France can't be the police of the world. That was the pretext. And so, because the people were waiting for that, he used that word for the Amazon, saying, you see, something is happening elsewhere, but it's not us. That was very political.
Yes.
Then there was another proposal of law coming in front of the Assembly in December. At the time, I requested the government of Macron to come to the ICC General Assembly, where we were together, to support the Pacific Islands in their request. And again, it was rejected by Emmanuel Macron majority. And this was in the media. And so when the convention, the Citizen Convention started in October 2019, some of the citizens were aware of the ecocide campaign, heard about it in the newspaper, at the radio, where I was giving interviews. And the government, when they organized the convention, they didn't ask me to come as an expert to speak to the convention. They were afraid of that. But the citizens requested that I come to speak with them and to explain them about the planetary boundaries, about the crime of ecocide, about the constitution. So they push in order that I can speak to them. And normally each expert had the right to speak once. And so I went there on the 11th of January, and I spoke about the constitution during the morning. And then the citizens, yes, but she didn't speak about the crime of ecocide. We want to hear about the crime of ecocide. So she has to come back this afternoon. So I came back to speak about the crime of ecocide. And in the meantime, with some colleagues from French NGOs, we were working on a national law, criminal national law on the crime of ecocide. So I presented the project to the citizens. And that's the basis of they used to write their measure and their proposal of law on the crime of ecocide. That's really how it happened. And it's true what you said about how it happened during the vote, but even before, because I remember the first time, it was just before the pandemic, in February or March, the first time that the room that you saw was clapping like that, which was the group, the working group on to feed. That was their subject. How to tackle climate change in order to protect the food, and that was their subject. And a guy named Guy presented the crime of ecocide in front of the full hemicycle, so the 150 in March. And he spoke about the crime of ecocide so well, it was so moving that everyone, jumped in the hemicycle and started to clap in March. And the media said, if there is one measure that we are sure will be presented in June, that will be the crime of ecocide, because it seems that everyone agrees on it. And it was confirmed 10 days ago, because, as I said, they voted in favor at 99.3%. And what they explained to the president when they presented the measures is that we really need this law, because what you request us to do is just to put some patches on the problem, like small measures, and if we don't have a current I mean, if you don't agree to look at all our measures at once, and specifically at the crime of ecocide, then it will be useless, because we have to change the whole system. We realized after 9 months of training that on those issues that the problem is huge, and that even if we come from different regions of France, different socioeconomic groups, we all agree today that this is the biggest challenge of our time, that people will die in the future because of climate change and the sixth mass extinction. And so we need very strong binding law, and I mean, even coercive, if I could say, in order to change the game, to change the rules.
I think this is very much what it comes down to, is that what we're looking at with the crime of ecocide is going to the source of the problem. So it's actually going to, rather than, you know, trying to address, like you were saying, the assembly mentioning kind of patching up different areas in order to try and help a problem that's really a systemic problem. And I think what's really struck me in what you just said is actually that the real impetus for this is coming from the grassroots. It's coming from the people, and when we started the Stop Ecocide campaign in 2017, that was in large part a response to the fact that, you know, Polly and I were finding that, you know, big NGOs and funders were not wanting to get behind this. It felt too risky, it felt too extreme, and it was actually that kind of conclusion of, you know, if this is going to work, it needs to be backed and funded by the people who understand, you know, what this means, and who understand that actually, you know, a measure that is that matches the scale of the problem, you know, can be put forward, and that's ultimately why we started the public campaign that is now an international foundation and taking this forward. And Valérie, you also mentioned that in fact the last time I saw Valérie was in December last year at the International Criminal Court, where we saw a very key development, because 2 Pacific islands officially called for consideration of adding ecocide to the list of international crimes. And that was also, you know, a very important moment. And it's been a very interesting journey, in that it has felt, I think, at many points, and I'm sure Valérie will agree, that, you know, it's almost like this is a kind of impossible hill we're trying to climb. And yet there have been certain points where something has changed, or, you know, someone has voiced something, whether that was Vanuatu in December, whether it was the Pope, for example, in November, who also called for ecocide crime, and now President Macron, you know, where the conversation around ecocide and the whole kind of area of discourse suddenly has a big jump, and that we've certainly experienced that even over here as a result of what Macron said. And I wonder if you can just say what's kind of, I mean, I think what was interesting as well is that he quite clearly reiterated what he'd said before about that this is really something that should be dealt with at the international level. How has it been in France since he made that announcement? What are people saying about it? You know, has it made a big difference there to people's sense that this is something that could actually happen? What's the current feeling?
Yeah, so just to contextualize, because sometimes it's not very clear, the fact is that when the 150 citizens presented their measures to Emmanuel Macron said 2 things. First, he explained them that, you know, it's very complicated to recognize a crime when we speak about ecosystems, when activities that, you know, constitute the crime are legal today. They are legal. So they told them in France, we have to start a working group, a legal working group, to define precisely what is a crime of ecocide, trying to escape a little bit. But you're right, what is said, and what was really amazing for me and for you, maybe not for the French citizen, but for us it was really important, is that he said at the television in front of the 150 people in the Élysée that he will support the recognition of the crime of ecocide before the ICC. He didn't speak about a convention at the UN level or what. He said before the ICC, and he used even the idea of recognizing the crime of ecocide as a severe ecological damage done knowing the consequences of the activities, which means that a crime under the idea of an activity is done by knowledge and not by intention to harm, which is very important. Of
Absolutely.
course, I don't know if you will respect this. Yeah, I'm not sure he will respect this, but what is very important is the diplomatic power of this sentence. The fact that of this statement, the fact that he said it, we translate it in all languages. You explained that in UK, in Sweden, everywhere. And since then, it's very interesting because I can't say whom, because it's still confidential, but other European states start to think about promoting the crime of ecocide before the ICC. And it becomes like a race. And that's why we should keep on really strongly this campaign, because the first powerful state who will support the vulnerable ones who are seeking this recognition might really change the situation. It means that it becomes something possible.
I think this is absolutely crucial, actually, the question of who is talking about it, and the fact that that actually sets in motion encouragement for further states. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, and that we've seen, of course, with the pandemic across the world, is that states are actually capable, and indeed, businesses as well, capable of moving much faster than they had previously claimed was possible. So that means that, we kind of know, we can now say, don't tell us you can't make these changes. We can see that it's possible to make change in a very short time when the political will is there. And I think there are people who have said to me, well, Macron was a bit cornered, wasn't he? After this, there was a strong political move towards the Greens, literally the day before he had to make his announcement.
Yep.
But I think in a sense, he may not intend to follow through on the letter of what he said, but it's almost too late for him in terms of having put that sentence out there and having made that declaration, if you like, is already making diplomatic waves. And I think you're seeing it, I think we're seeing it, and I think we're going to see quite a big acceleration of people both understanding what ecocide crime is and could be, and for state actors to be moving forward with, or even want to be seen to be moving forward with this.
I agree. I think we are really at a milestone in the campaign, and that's why. And it shows also that we really need the support of the citizen on the campaign, because when a lot of people are asking the same thing, the political leaders are trapped. They can't escape from this responsibility. And they know that they are seen. They are seen on the scene, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's really important that yeah, no, it's true.
I think something that's really struck me in conversations with you, Valérie, in the past is that you've also had the opportunity to speak to corporate audiences as well. And perhaps surprisingly, actually, you know, many senior corporate officials would actually welcome this crime because they potentially could see it as a tool to enable them to move practices and to direct funds in much healthier and fairer ways, which at the moment they don't have that legal tool that allows them to say, no, we can't do that. We need to do this instead. Can you say a bit more about how your experience of that has been?
Yeah, I must say that that it's Polly who whistled that to me in a way that I remember when she started to say, and I was really surprised when she said it, that it could be a tool for the CEOs. I said, okay, how, you know? And then I understood, in fact, and she's really right on that. I understood that the CEOs have very few power, because the ones who have the power within the corporates, within the multinationals, are the stakeholders.
You mean the
And the
shareholders?
stakeholders, what, I mean, you know, when they are stakeholders, the shareholders, excuse me. So yeah, the ones who have the power in the corporates are really the shareholders, and they are looking for profit first of all. And so if a CEO try to drive the company towards more clean products or investments, the shareholders most of the time try to stop that, because it takes too long, you know, to shift from one system to another, and during that time they cannot expect big profits. And so I remember once I was in Paris at the Palais des Congrès, which is a really huge place, and I had to speak to 1,000 CEOs about the crime of ecocide, and I was, you know, in the backstage, and I was a bit afraid of it. I said, my God, you know, they are going to kill me when I will explain them the goal of the law. And I tried to explain them with the idea of Polly, you know, in my head, and said, I'm giving you a power with this law, because if some activities become illegal, then you can say no to the shareholders. You can explain them that you need to shift the investments and to greener products, to greener industry, and that you might be sued if there is a consequences, or if there is a lawsuit against you, and that if they are not happy with that, of course you can resign. But if you resign, the next CEO will have the same responsibility on his shoulders. And so you have the power to follow your mind, because most of them were telling me, we would like our companies to be more how do you say, virtuous?
Yeah, considerate.
You say that in English?
Yeah,
virtuous.
virtuous.
Yeah, and but we can't do it, because the system is as such that the shareholders don't let us change the politics of the strategies of the companies. And so I spoke to them, and I explained them that, and I was really surprised, because the whole room, you know, at the end, jumped on their feet, and there was an ovation, and I really realized that we shall show that, we shall explain that, and that's why since that time I try to give conferences more in management school, in business school, and I can see a shift. For example, 3 weeks ago, you know, Sciences Po is famous everywhere in the world. The students decided that they will request the direction of all Sciences Po school to become greener, and they drafted a chart, and they asked me to sign it and to support it, and 15,000 students from the biggest school in France last year signed a petition requesting that, saying that they will not agree to work for any big polluters. And so there is something changing, really. Within the head of the young leaders, the head of the CEOs, but we need to help them. And what they were also explaining me is that they have no compass, because there are no binding obligation for the corporates, like, for example, respecting the planetary boundaries, for example, like like a frame, like an ecological roof that you cannot go through. They have no compass. They have no compass. They don't know what they are allowed to do or what they are not allowed to do. The Ecocide law could help them a lot on that.
I think so too, and I think that it's actually a new way of thinking about the rules of how we operate. I had a conversation just last week with an insurance expert who was dealing with kind of the frameworks that businesses use to assess risk, and risk and governance. And we chatted for quite a while about this, and he said, well, here's the $1 million question. How would Ecocide law fit into those frameworks of risk and governance? How would it affect how companies assess risk? And I said, now obviously this is not my area of speciality, but I said, okay, how would it affect those frameworks? How would, say, the crime of murder appear in those frameworks? If you think about that, you'll have an idea about where Ecocide would fit in. And he kind of went, he was like, wow. He suddenly understood the implication of applying a criminal law, and how that actually potentially changed the entire landscape of what he'd been working in for many, many years. And I think when it comes down to why does it need to be a crime? Why is it a crime that matters? Is because companies have these legal obligations or CEOs have legal obligations to maximize profit, but they have to do it within the law, within what criminal law allows. So I think you're really hitting a key point there by saying that by describing it as a compass. Criminal law can create that kind of compass, those limits that are actually required within which they can act. And I think that's actually really important.
In fact, in France, what can help us a lot is that we have a law which is unique about the duty of vigilance or duty of care since 2016, which means that in France, the corporates have the obligation to submit an annual report showing their efforts to respect a duty of care or duty of vigilance. The problem is that this law is not binding again, which means that they have to submit the report, but there is no possibility to sue a company because they are not respecting their duty of vigilance. And so what we explain now to the legal experts and to the politicians is that what we need with this law, which now is even considered at the EU level as a model of law that could be adopted at the EU level, is that we need a criminal side of that, which means that if we realize that the companies are not respecting this duty of vigilance, and that they do it knowing the consequences on the ecosystems, on the conditions of living anywhere in the world, as far as they are French, then we should consider it as a criminal offense. And that's the way we deal now with the experts, to explain them that, you know, in English, a crime can be a murder or how do you call that? I don't know in English. An offense, something which is lower but in France, a crime is always a crime of intent. You can't call an action a crime if there is no intention to commit. Yeah. So we have to deal with this problem in France. And so what we want now is to recognize the offense of duty of vigilance, which can lead to jail in French law. But I fully agree with you when you speak about comparing it to a murder. That's what I'm saying also to the politicians or to the people or even the legal experts who don't want to go out of their box, because that's the problem. They don't want to go out of their box, of their referral code, that what they learn about environmental law, about criminal law. You know, criminal law is like that and we cannot move from that. And they say, of course, but law can be changed, you know.
And I also think that we're at a strange and very exciting in one way point where we actually have the solutions that we need. You know, we have the potential to do things differently environmentally. You know, we have the models for regenerative economies, we have the models for sustainability, but they're not being implemented fast enough. Do you think that this is part of the reason why ecocide crime is now becoming a key topic of conversation? Because it's almost like it could be that tool that allows us to move things into the directions which are already there and ready to be used.
Yes, of course, but it's true that because of the fact that most of the lawyers have been trained according to a certain format, even if they understand the goal, they don't know how to, you know, to create this law according to the ongoing rules. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to explain them, okay, but I understand when you speak about a murder, it means that there was the intention to kill someone, but at the end you have someone who is killed, one person. But when you pollute or when you destroy huge ecosystems and you jeopardize the life of future generation, we are not speaking about one person. We are speaking about millions of people, or even maybe humankind itself. And I have also the problem with with the German or with the people in France who faced the Shoah, and they said, no, we cannot agree to have a crime which is at the same level that genocide. But they said, but you know, genocide is part of a population of a country who has been killed by another one. But here I'm speaking about humankind, about the human species, who is at stake today. The future of the species is at stake. So you have to understand that we are speaking about the primary crime, which is killing all life on Earth at the end. But it's very complicated, you know. It's complicated to make them understand that, or to make them understand that we should look at the consequences and not at the intention, because the intention could be just, as you said, to get more profit, but the consequences are so big, so huge, that we have to find a way, and we have to create new laws, new way to speak about it, new way to define it. And I can tell you that it's a big challenge. And I know for Polly it was a big challenge, but for me in France, it's a huge challenge. Even with people who are very committed in protecting the environment, protecting human rights, it's a big deal for them to change their lexic, and I mean the way they think, or the way they used to work. But I'm confident that we will find a solution at the national level and at the international level. We will have to anyway.
Valérie, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And I hope all those watching have found this interesting and stimulating. It's a very exciting development in what has been a campaign of many years, which now seems to be accelerating at quite a pace. We suggest you watch this space and go to stopecocide.earth for more ways that you can support, donate, or sign up as an Earth Protector, and put your name to this campaign to make ecocide an international crime. Thank you.